So Adrien Broner, AB, has asked Floyd Mayweather for help in one of his posts on Instagram. What he said was to Floyd Mayweather, "Big bro, this shit is amazing. I promise. I think he will be one of the best. Just stay on him like your father was on you. Real talk. I miss you, man. I know we ain't spoken a while, but honestly, I think you need the most right now when it comes to this boxing shit." Like, this is crazy because he went from asking for Floyd to fight and stuff, went from doing all of these things to then asking him for his help to get him back on his feet. Adrien Broner had a significant fall from grace as a fighter. He was a person who was seen as, who at one point was seen as going to be the next Floyd Mayweather, that next guy, the next elite top fighter who would take over boxing after Floyd Mayweather was retired. But unfortunately, he never exceeded those expectations. He never did. And it all started with his loss to Marcos Maidana. Most of the problems with Adrien Broner just stem from his lack of adaptation and his work ethic as a boxer in general. I'm aware he works hard work. That's him. 25-8, suffering from success. He's a hard worker, a very skilled fighter. He's a very hard worker and a skilled fighter, but at the same time, he could never evolve his game as a fighter. And even after his successful run at lower weight classes, by the time he went to 147, he could not beat anyone at 147. He couldn't beat any of the elite fighters at 147 or 140, and he never had like a crazy upset victory where he defeated an elite fighter. He didn't at all. He had an upset loss to Marcos Maidana, but seriously. And another thing about Adrien Broner is how him as a fighter and as a person in general, he always gives the fans an expectation that, oh, I'm coming back, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm gonna make it for myself. I gotta be more influential to the children. I'm gonna throw my hands more. I'm gonna have a good comeback. And every time he comes back, he disappoints his fans. Does every time. Throughout the years, throughout all of the fight hype videos that we've seen of Adrien Broner, I've seen so many things. I've seen him go from a happy, positive individual to someone who was always intoxicated on fight hype, dealing with mental health problems. It's like a success story that just went downhill gradually over time without any compensation. Adrien Broner, every time he would take a loss or something, he would blame everything on everyone else. He would, the money for Floyd, he got the whole hood with him. But he didn't win that. He didn't beat Manny Pacquiao. He didn't win that fight. He lost. Then he then went on to say, oh, I beat that boy. You know I beat that boy, and all of this other nonsense, when he knew dang well, he didn't know dang well. It sounded like he genuinely did not believe that he lost that fight, which is delusional, but at least he's confident in his own opinion. It seemed like one of those situations where every time a downside would happen in his career, he'd blame everything on everyone else and think that everyone's going after him, when in reality, it's his own fault. You know, even back probably in 2013, after Adrien Broner got a win over Paulie Malignaggi is a very good speaker. He's a very good, he was an elite fighter for his time. Many people do not consider Paulie an elite fighter necessarily, but I would consider him so at one point. And after that Adrien Broner fight, they were having this weird conferencing together, I believe, and Paulie was giving him some advice about money. Broner wasn't listening, but he was acting like he was listening. Because if he was listening, he wouldn't be in this position right now. Definitely wouldn't. Talking about PayPal me some money, I'm broke. Like, that's not good. That's not good. That's not being influential. That's not showing kids a good image. It's not something that the hood wants to get behind. It isn't. You know, I know he has a song with Lil Boosie now. That's dope. That's very dope. That's very dope. But if we're speaking about his boxing career, it's going on a significant decline, and it has been declining ever since the year 2013, I think. Ever since the year 2013, it's been on a gradual decline. And it was the end of 2013 too. Adrien Broner has been through a lot, many different lapses, many different obstacles and struggles throughout his career. And for him at this point to be asking Floyd Mayweather for help, the person who he wanted to fight, the person who he distanced himself away from as a result, the person who he's even admitted that he genuinely did not like the shit that he did, he's now going back to him and asking him for help. I doubt Floyd would give him help in return. He'd probably say something like, oh, you should have signed to me or something like that. But Floyd Mayweather did what he could with Adrien Broner. Adrien Broner was a failed project, as I would describe it. He was a fighter who I would consider a success in many ways because he had dominant victories over many fighters, and he got multiple belts in multiple weight classes. But when it came to the top of the tip in terms of competition, he could never just win. He always ended up falling back as a fighter due to either inactivity or just him limiting himself depending on a shoulder roll. It's a good thing that he added to his assets, but as much as it is a good thing, it's not the best thing for every single fight. When he fought against Maidana, his best bet in that fight was to not use a shoulder roll, but to fight with Maidana. I don't care if Broner would have got stopped in that fight. That was by far his best bet. Most definitely his best bet. Because every time he'd use a shoulder roll, he's just using it as a defense. He was letting Maidana win rounds that he shouldn't have won. Even though Maidana is a very skilled, unorthodox fighter, Broner really got manhandled in that fight. Even if the scorecards weren't that far, that was by far the worst beating and the worst state that I've ever seen Adrien Broner in as a fighter. He lost to Pacquiao more convincingly, but the Maidana fight is where he got dropped 2 times. And the rounds where he would survive, he would just end up getting really hurt or just mushed around and ran around and just outsmarted most of the time, because both of the times that he was dropped, he got outsmarted on both occasions. So it was a pretty dominant upset win for Maidana. And it was a very highly viewed fight because Broner was this trash talker, this natural guy, this person who could talk trash, this very marketable figure in the boxing industry. Broner was by far one of the most marketable fighters ever. I would even say he was more marketable than a current Floyd fighter, Tank. In terms of fighting style, Tank was the more entertaining, but in terms of personality and getting an audience together, definitely Broner. I feel like Broner was definitely a valid trash talker and had really good skills at that. Broner was a very talented fighter when it came to those things. A very talented individual when it came to those things. With his talent in fighting as well too, but definitely his trash talk. And just his antics, him dancing to France Montana back when he was in his prime years ago, in his 20s, world star hip hop, all of those things really made him who he was. He was more of a flashy representation of the 20-year-olds during those times, like people who are currently in their 30s. When it came to Paulie Malignaggi, because this is 2 fights after DeMarco, Paulie Malignaggi is a trash talker, and Broner are trash talkers. They're both trash talkers. According to Malignaggi's podcast, the Broner fight brought him like the thing that he needed when it came to boxing back inside of him. Like, Malignaggi was very motivated to beat a fighter in Adrien Broner. He was very motivated, and it really showed. He upped his trash talking, like he said in his own podcast. He upped himself, he upped his trash talk, he upped all of these things because a fire was ignited in Paulie Malignaggi to really make a statement and upset Adrien Broner, who was trash talking him and even winning some of the verbal exchanges. Now, from the things that I've seen, Paulie Malignaggi was winning most of those exchanges. They lying to you, you lying to yourself. They gave those belts to you. Like, we ain't even heard of Gavin Reese in like 10 years. Now, I would give Broner the fight because his shots just seemed more effective, but it was still a close fight. Now, one of his best victories was against Antonio DeMarco, I'm pretty sure like a year earlier, completely dominated DeMarco. The problem with DeMarco was that he did not throw that many punches. He didn't throw that many punches at all. And he just wasn't that good of a boxer in general. He had a victory over Jorge Linares though before that, but he was straight down on points. He pressured Linares into falling, and Linares kept trying to fight for his life to win that fight. But that was by far Broner's probably best performance. The inside fighting, the slips, his use of his physicality, using his head, very good performance. And with all of those successes, his downsides were a lot more popularized. His loss to Maidana was very popularized because of his trash talk, saying, he's not even going to say no mas, he's going to say I'm done in English, just for Broner to get dropped 2 times and take a beating, and the problem getting solved. Yeah. To him losing to Sean Porter by unanimous decision. He dropped Porter in the 12th round, but when he dropped him, it was more of a slip, and he walked away like he won the fight. To having a split decision with Granados. Granados is a good fighter. He gave Porter a run for his money, but still, to losing to Mikey Garcia and taking a beating from him too, to him ending to his last loss against Manny Pacquiao, and in between Jesse Vargas. I ain't losing no Jesse Vargas, man. You know, he was going on Leonard Ellerby and stuff like that. He was going in on Leonard Ellerby during the press conference, like, you ain't with me. You got like, nah. Just for him to end up, just for him to be in a position where he's asking for Floyd Mayweather's help now that he's making a comeback to fight Omar Figueroa. This is sad. This is not good at all. This ain't good. It's good to ask people for help, but does he really? I doubt that he's really cares about Floyd Mayweather's son. I mean, why would you? You're not his dad, but you know what I mean. Like, it's either he cares less about it and more or less cares just about Floyd helping him. And I doubt Floyd's going to help him, because the problem is that AB was given so many chances by his own fan base, by everyone, but he would disappoint every single time. And that was the problem. And that was the repetitive thing with his career. He's as old as Errol Spence, basically, but the trajectories of their careers have drastically changed. And that's really noticeable. From Broner's partying and drinking, he really fucked up the fighter in him, suffering from success. And not even suffering from success, adjusting to fame. That's what it's called, adjusting to fame. And apparently he still hasn't adjusted, and his fame has been depleting. Tell me how you feel about Broner's comments in the comment section below. Tell me your opinions about him. Tell me how do you feel about Broner's prime, and if it was an illusion or not, and other random stuff that you'd like to talk about in the comment section. I would really appreciate it. Also, you guys should like, subscribe, and share, please. I'm trying to grow this YouTube channel. So, bye guys. Thank you for watching.